Well, I have to just say it. Have you seen the movie The Candidate with Robert Redford?
Yes.
Okay. So in that movie, he's running for the U.S. Senate in California. And he has this knockdown, dragged out campaign. And finally, he wins the election. And Robert Redford turns to his campaign manager and says, "We won. Now what?" I was expecting a better response, but that's okay. It's the first day of the year, no big deal. But that's the question. Now what? We've celebrated Christmas. Now what? We welcomed the Christ child into the world. Now what? Most of us at this point in life should feel the 3 A's of life after the Christmas season: accepted, affirmed, and approved. Right? But chances are most of us feel like the 3 P's of life: pooped, perplexed, and pathetic. And on the other side of Christmas, we sit here on this first Sunday of the year asking, now what? We've sung the Christmas carols. We've lit the candles. We've celebrated the birth of the Messiah. And we've been with family either in person or online, FaceTiming, however we do it. We should feel so restored and relaxed. But I don't know about you. I slept till 1 o'clock on Monday after the Christmas day. Many of us, including me, we feel wiped out. It's like that old 1960s song by the Surfers. Wipe out. Okay, I'll stop right there.
Yes.
Well, you're a tough crowd today. It's like the vacation you need after the vacation. And so you have the Hebrew people returning from exile to the land that they loved. They were in the midst of being restored. And this certainly describes the situation in Isaiah today. Many of those who were living as captives in Babylon, they had just returned from a 53-year exile. They were dragged off. The political leaders, the intelligentsia, the folks who knew how to make things work. The leadership was just dragged away, and now they're returning to the homes that they once had. And they are just as destroyed as they were. The place where they worshiped is no more. You know, it's like pulling the lights out of here, devastating the place. There was nothing familiar anymore. It was all destroyed. And so they're facing this, and they ask the question, how can I be restored spiritually? How can our people be restored as we gather? I mean, they did maintain some traditional religious practices as they were in exile. They intermingled them with superstition and pagan rites. But when they came back, they had to be disappointed. It'd be like going back north during the season and coming back to Lely Church and finding, the place not taken care of, holes in the roof, and the electrical wiring pulled out, lights not working. It'd be kind of depressing, wouldn't it? Would be for me. Restoration, anticipation quickly declined. It became aggravation. It became desperation. It became humiliation. There's a familiar lament out of the Lamentations that captures their feelings. It says, "Remember, O Lord, what has befallen us. Look and see our disgrace. Our inheritance has been turned over to strangers, our homes to aliens, Mount Zion which lies desolate, jackals prowl over it." I mean, those words describe just exasperation. Not a sense of joy, but a sense of depression. New beginnings. But this is new beginnings. New beginnings don't always start at the top of the mountain. New beginnings for many of us start when we're in the valley, if you will, when things are just falling apart, the wheels are coming off the wagon. But new beginnings have a way of pointing us towards a movement of restoration, and it takes courage to be restored. It takes a sense of drive to move forward. We yearn to be restored as we once were. I remember I was 35 years old, and I was at this church in eastern Lancaster County, Cedar Grove Presbyterian Church. And I was a wrestler in high school, okay? And I wasn't that great, but I was a wrestler. And so I was invited to go and meet the wrestling team at Garden Spot High School. And I thought, I'm 35, I'm running, I'm in great shape. I'm going to go out here, I'm just going to take that young kid down and pin him. Well, 3 seconds later, I'm looking at the lights. It was over before I even knew it. What's the old country song that says, I may not be good as I once was, but I'm good as I'll ever be. You know, how many of you made New Year's resolutions? I mean, how many of you wrote them out? Well, I might as well just ask what movie you saw last week. Most people write resolutions down. And you can tell that this is the season for resolutions. Have you watched the television ads that are out there? There's specials for gym memberships. You can get a real good deal for meals to lose weight. You can get a Peloton at an incredibly low price. They know the market. They know what we're thinking. It's restoration, a new year, beginning again. Well, the Atlantic Monthly ran an article on resolutions that people were making for 2023. They may be tough to read, but let me read them to you. So this guy who wrote the article, he surveyed a wide variety of people about the resolutions that they were making for 2023. And so I'm going to read a couple of them to you. They may capture the resolutions that maybe you're thinking about. I want to laugh more. The laughter that makes you cry and makes your sides ache. When's the last time you laughed like that? My intention for 2023 is to replace mean thoughts with kind and patient ones. To take everything and everyone less seriously and to try to be the best person I can. I resolve not to take anything personally or overthink or politicize any comments. Just play dumb and not engage like a robot like I'm Siri. I want to be better at understanding others. To talk less and listen more. To stop complaining and focus on being a better person. This is a great one. I'm headed for age 70 in a few months and am becoming a curmudgeon. It's not how I want to live the last chapters of my life. To follow the example of a good friend and from time to time send handwritten, snail-mailed notes, letters to family and friends. I want to invite our teenagers' friends over for dinner as often as I can because it's fun and nothing breeds optimism like listening to kids planning their future. These are thought-out resolutions. It's not like I want to lose 20 pounds in 2 months. That's mine, but that's not going to happen. Now, we yearn to be restored and made new. To return to a life that may be truer than the one we are living now. So here's your joke for the day. A guy spots a sign outside a house that reads, "Talking dog for sale." So intrigued, the guy walks in and, "So what have you done with your life?" he asks the dog. "I've led a very full life," says the dog. "I've lived in the Alps rescuing avalanche victims. Then I served my country in Iraq. And now I spend my days reading to the residents of a retirement home." And the guy is just flabbergasted. He asks the dog's owner, "Why on earth would you want to get rid of an incredible dog like that?" And the owner says, "Because he's a liar. He never did any of that." We want to be true to ourselves. And I think it all goes back to grace. You know, several years ago, psychiatrist Scott Peck, maybe more than several, a number of years ago, wrote a book called The Road Less Traveled. Maybe have you read that book? Okay, it's like movies. It's filled with what he had learned about life from his work with people with all sorts of mental ailments. And the one thing he observed was a tendency toward mental wellness even among patients who had reason to seek psychiatric help. Some of these people had survived serious emotional trauma, much better than the circumstances seemed to warrant, and Peck came to think of a force of goodness in the world. And he eventually identified this force using the word serendipity, which the dictionary defines as the gift of finding valuable or agreeable things not sought for. As a Christian, Peck realized that the word grace fits that definition also. And so in the book, he wrote extensively about this force using both words. Associating grace with serendipity was one of the original contributions to the subject of grace. So several years later, he's on a flight to Minneapolis. And he usually took advantage of flying time to do some writing, like many of us may do. And so when a man took the seat next to him, Peck gave the usual non-verbal signals one gives when one doesn't want to engage in conversation. The man soon buried himself in a novel, and they flew side by side in silence for most of the flight. And finally, the man looked up from his novel and said, "I hate to bother you, but you don't happen by any chance to know the meaning of the word serendipity, do you?" Peck responded that as far as he knew, he was the only person who had written a substantial portion of a book on the subject. And that it was perhaps serendipity that at that precise moment a man wanted to know the meaning of the word he happened to be sitting next to an authority on the subject. This, of course, led to further conversations, and Peck explained that his book was a kind of integration of psychology and religion. And the man said, probably like other people say to us, "Well, I don't know about religion anymore," and went on to tell Peck about some doubts that he had thinking about leaving the church. In response, Peck explained how questioning helped individuals move from the hand-me-down religion of childhood to a mature, personal one. And when the two landed in Minneapolis, the man said, "I don't have the foggiest idea of what all this means, but maybe I don't have to leave the church after all." That's God's grace, running ahead of not just that man, but the grace runs ahead of us. And it puts us in a conversation with others who can help us, or we can help others with that grace. That is the foundation of who we are as Christians. You know, grace is so amazing. It runs ahead of us, prepares the way for us to respond to God. We can't do that without him. That grace is something that restores us in our most desperate of moments. It's that grace that restores broken relationships when things are just falling apart. It's that grace that guides us every single day of our walk with Christ. God seeks to restore each of us, to make us new after years of going off the beaten path, denting our halo, so to speak, and looking for life in all the wrong places. Now what? God will take us to places known and unknown. Now what? Pray. Now what? Trust. Now what? Let God restore you. Now what? I can't wait. Surely they are my people, children who will not deal falsely, and he became their Savior in all their distress. Now what? Grace today. Now what? Grace tomorrow. Now what? Grace forever. Amen.